Hello and welcome in to the Hecklers Podcast. I am your host, Gordon Culletto. We are riding solo today as Billy's out of town this week, but don't worry, we've got plenty to talk about. We're going to be doing some news, a little bit of fantasy discussion. Tyler Boyd landed with the Titans. Zeke Elliott makes his return to Dallas. Rashee Rice finds himself in even more legal trouble. And our leading story, Tom Brady gets roasted. So, Tom Brady, they did the roast of Tom Brady, and I actually thought it was pretty good. This thing was everywhere this week. I feel like it was every podcast was talking about it. My social media was just filled with it, like my For You pages and things like that. So Tom Brady still has an immense impact on the football landscape. So good to see that he is still out there doing stuff, and I'll never get tired of seeing Tom Brady as a Patriots fan. And it's pretty funny to watch him get roasted. Like, he's not really the type of personality that you would expect to be able to sit there and take it, and I do think he looked uncomfortable at times. But I thought it was fun, and it was really great to see some familiar faces, so many great Patriots from over the years. It was really interesting to see Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady all in the same place. Obviously, things have really gone downhill for them since they parted ways. Obviously, Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft not in good standing, which actually leads into what I think was the joke of the night. I think Bill Belichick did a really good job, but the joke that he made where he said something to the effect of, this is the roast of Tom Brady, not to be confused with the roast of Bill Belichick, which is a 10-part series on Apple TV. I thought that was really good. So kudos to that joke writer who did that for Bill, although I wouldn't be surprised if that was Bill himself. It's, I keep thinking to myself that this kind of reminds me of like Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, where like this thing's going to drag out and take way too long for them to come back together and for Belichick to get the recognition from the Crafts that he deserves, which is really unfortunate. I grew up a Patriots fan, and I want to be able to celebrate those years, celebrate the dynasty and everything it was. And it feels like that's going to have to wait a while for Belichick and the Crafts to get back on the same page so that we can celebrate his contribution. So, that's something that I think is just going to take time, and we'll have to watch it, but it was good to see them in the same room together. I hope that it is a sign that the two sides will be able to come together at some point and hopefully reach some kind of conclusion that allows Belichick to receive the recognition he deserves within the team. But let's not let that take away from just how funny the roast was, because I thought that there were some really good jokes in there. Aaron Hernandez caught a lot of strays, which I guess the moratorium on Aaron Hernandez jokes in the public has subsided, so we are free to make the jokes that we've been making in private. And it was just so good to get to see a lot of expatriates out there having a good time. And like I said, Brady he took it on the gorgeous dimpled chin, as they would say. All right, let's talk about Rashee Rice, who finds himself in legal trouble yet again. This time he allegedly struck a photographer while at a nightclub in Dallas. So here's the thing, without knowing all of the details, like, I feel like Rashee Rice has to know better and has to understand the situation that he is in, right? You are already in the midst of a PR nightmare. Why are you going to make it worse for yourself? Understand the situation. Understand that you're on thin ice, both with the general public and with the NFL, and honestly with the law. You cannot be out fooling around. Like, you can't be caught in these compromising situations. Now, we all know that paparazzi and photographers can be incredibly invasive. They don't respect celebrities' privacy. They seldom take no for an answer, right? And we've seen celebrities blow up at photographers before. It doesn't end well for the celebrity, though. Like, people don't view you as a victim. because you blew up at a photographer, right? Like, it's not a good situation. It's not a good response, right? So I often say that there's like three pieces to these kinds of situations. The first is sort of the human portion of this, which is that anytime, whether it's Rashee Rice causing a big accident because he's speeding or hitting somebody physically, like people are impacted by these actions. We can't lose sight of that. But then there's also sort of the professional PR side of it, which is that, like, dude, you have an image, you have a brand, you're basically a business, right? Like, you're essentially a contract employee, right? So you represent the Chiefs, but you also represent yourself in your own value, and you need to preserve that, and you need to understand how your actions are going to impact your value. And then of course there's the football side of it, which we don't love to talk about because it feels shallow, but the reality is this is a football podcast. These are players. There are impacts to their actions, right, on the field. So in this case, right, I think Rashee Rice is guaranteed to miss some time, right? It sounds like the Chiefs are preparing for as much as half a season. It sounds like people who are a little bit more cynical about the league say probably just a couple games, right? So could vary, but certainly there will be some time missed, right? So I think if you're Rashee Rice, you have to stop and just get out of the public eye for a minute. Understand the situation. Doesn't help you to be out causing trouble. You need to kind of step back. You need to just be quiet, be out of the limelight, be out of the media until you get into football season, and then play football. Let the action on the field speak for you. I don't know what it is about young receivers, whether it's DJ Moore when he was here in Carolina, speeding in a work zone, could have easily killed somebody. Henry Ruggs, right? It's just, here's the thing, and I heard Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR driver, say this. He said, I cannot own a fast car because if I did, I couldn't stop myself from speeding, right? And I think I think the reality is these are kids, right? 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, whatever, who all of a sudden have all the money in the world, and, the first thing they want to do is the first thing probably any of us would do, which is to get a fast car, right? And when you have a fast car, you're going to want to go fast. And, I think you just have to learn to be a professional. You have to learn to be an adult. And unfortunately, that early 20s is just a time when it's easy to make bad decisions. And it seems like that's what a lot of guys are doing. So I hope for Rashee Rice's sake that he gets it together, that he's able to get on the straight and narrow off the field, and that he can continue his success on the field because he's in a great spot on a great team. With great people around him, and if he can get it straightened out, he's got a lot of really great winning football ahead of him, and I hope that that's what he does. So let's move into something I think a little bit happier than the Rashee Rice story. Zeke Elliott going to be making his return to the Big D, heading down to Dallas from New England. So the first thing I asked myself when I heard this news and kind of heard that he was considering going there was, what is the football impact of this move? And, I personally don't think that there is a massive impact. I think Zeke, his best years are behind him. He's not a 3-down back anymore. He provides some utility. He's a good complementary back to have now. I don't think he's going to lead your running back room. So they're almost certainly going to have to run some type of committee. But I think at the end of the day, right, this puts an enormous amount of pressure on Dak Prescott to really be the guy. And I think that's kind of what Jerry Jones wants, right? Which is to say, look, Dak, we're paying you all this money. You're going to be due for another contract. We need you to prove it. We need to prove that you're going to be able to win the division, that you're going to be able to go deep into the playoffs. And honestly, the goal really should be Super Bowl at this point, right? That's a really good team. there really is no excuse for them not making it to the Super Bowl outside of Dak Prescott and maybe Mike McCarthy. So, there's questions to be answered there. I think Jerry Jones is basically saying, hey, Dak, you need to go win, right? You have CeeDee Lamb. You have, I think, Brandon Cooks, right? You have, I think, two good tight ends in Jake Ferguson and Luke Schoonmaker, right? Like, you should be able to make this work and be able to compete, and not to mention a very good defense, right? You should be able to compete with these other teams around the league, right? We shouldn't be losing to the Commanders or whatever. So I think this is largely a move to just bring a body in, bring somebody in who can, handle, a running back by committee approach. The the biggest thing here is I think this does more for the fan base than it does for the performance on the field. I think you bring in a guy like Zeke, it brings a little bit of feel good energy, a little bit of positivity to an organization and a fan base that was a little bit frustrated with the lack of moves this offseason. Does bringing in Zeke Elliott make up for not making a ton of moves? No, but people kind of get, some good feeling and get a little bit of good vibes, I would say, from bringing him in. And Zeke is probably going to be really good for the locker room, too. Like, built-in relationship with Dak Prescott. I think having him around doesn't hurt. There's something to be said for bringing in locker room guys and team chemistry. Like, we've seen, the Raiders, right? You get a bad coach out of the building, team chemistry goes up, and all of a sudden you can actually win a game, right? So chemistry is important, and Zeke might bring that. It certainly, I think it's a callback to that. One of the things I love about it is it makes me think about when, a good bit ago when it was like Zeke and Saquon Barkley and Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley, and it felt like such a really promising, fun. I love running the football. I love a good rushing attack. So, that time felt like there were so many bright running back stars, and it just feels like that star has dimmed so much to where, like, you hardly see people even taking running backs in fantasy football, like in redrafts in the first round, because it's like I can, in the third round or even fourth round, get like a Kenneth Walker and be just fine, right? So it's like, it's nice because it warms my heart a little bit to see a name that I loved watching, back with the team where it all started. So, I think that's probably what it's good for. Were there better options out there? I mean, possibly, but at the end of the day, like, I think Zeke is a perfectly fine back. He was okay in New England. I think it would have been better if Ramondre could stay healthy and Zeke wasn't asked to do too much. Like, I think if you ask him to carry a bigger load, it's not going to go well. But if you can get him in there, do some receiving, some good running situations, like, I think he'll be good. I think he'll be a serviceable running back at this point. Okay, so we've talked about Zeke. Let's go ahead. We're going to dive into Tyler Boyd joining the Titans. I think this is probably the other kind of big story that's out there right now, as the Bengals kind of have to make some decisions about their wide receiver room. Obviously, Boyd leaves, and now they're making a decision about T. Higgins, who wants out. So, it's interesting. Landing with the Titans, to me, this signals they're definitely between this and what I kind of view as a little bit of an overspend on Calvin Ridley, although it was kind of just the nature of the receiving class and free agency. But anyways, you've really invested in building around Will Levis and giving him the best possible chance to succeed. To me, the other part of this is I think they want the verdict to be out on Levis this year. Like, I don't think they want to fart around with this for 2 years. I mean, I'm sure they wish it could take 2 hours, but I don't think that they really want to kick the can down the road and lose another offseason if Will Levis isn't the guy. So I think the idea was put the best talent around him, right? He's going to have DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to have Calvin Ridley. Now he'll have Tyler Boyd, right? And they added Tony Pollard, right? Like, I think they want to build around him and just say, okay, it's kind of like the Jerry Jones, Dak Prescott thing. if you're going to be our quarterback, I need to see it, and you're going to have to do it, and you're going to have to be responsible. I think it's almost the theme of this offseason, because I think the Bills did the same thing with Josh Allen, where it was like, all right, dude, you had the part of your career where we can afford to keep people around you. Now it's time for you to shine. This is a little different because they can afford to put people around Will Levis. But he still does, the expectations there, right? You got to prove that you're going to be the guy. So that's, to me, that's the biggest signal, is that they're going to build around Levis, and they're going to see if he has it. I like Will Levis. I think he's got a big arm. Weird dude who puts mayonnaise in coffee. I will use mayonnaise on a grilled cheese, but that's just to get a nice golden crust. Putting it in your coffee makes no sense. I guess it turns it a nice golden color, but just use creamer for that, you maniac. And I think if you're Will Levis, the biggest concern I have is you bring in Calvin Ridley, who's sort of this intermediate, short route, kind of inside the numbers type receiver. That's kind of where Will Levis struggles. He's a lot better down the field, a lot better kind of towards the outside. I feel like he can really use his arm to get the ball over defensive backs. I think those middle of the field passes that require a little bit more touch and precision, he's going to struggle. So, I don't know how much Calvin Ridley helps, but we'll see. The other piece of this is Treylon Burks. Obviously, he gets pushed further down the depth chart. I'm of the opinion that his time is come to an end. He has run out of runway to try to prove that he is a starting caliber receiver for the Titans, and they, will let him go after his contract, if not earlier than that. And he'll get a chance somewhere else, as most first round picks do, right? Rarely is the first team the last team. So he'll get another chance, but I think he's out of runway with the Titans, and much like John Mechie, right? He's just gonna have to wait for an opportunity with another team, or demand a trade. So thinking about their depth chart, we talked about it, right? DeAndre Hopkins gonna be probably on the outside, Calvin Ridley kind of moving around, but most likely in the slot, and then you'll have Tyler Boyd kind of playing opposite DeAndre Hopkins. I think it's a good set of receivers. I think it's a good lineup. I think Will Levis shouldn't really have any excuses, unless injuries take away some of those guys. But it should be a quality lineup. And then of course with Tony Pollard in the backfield and Tajay Spears, they should have a decent committee running back system to be able to move the ball. So we'll see what happens. I don't expect much for the Titans. I think they're probably the worst, if not close to the worst team in the AFC South right now. So they've got a lot of ways to go, and with Vrabel leaving, who knows? I think that they're kind of a mess. So we'll see. I don't want to rule anything out, but I don't have high hopes. So real quickly, we'll kind of finish out the episode like we've done the last time with a quick kind of talk about fantasy football. I do some dynasty football, so I like to, include some insights into these podcasts to hopefully help you with your dynasty teams. And what I would like to kind of focus on today, we talked about, I think, quarterbacks last time. I want to focus a little bit on some of the receivers in this particular class. I think Xavier Worthy, because of the issues with Rashee Rice, and kind of the depth of that receiving room, people are really overvaluing him. I'd really be cautious about taking him super high. I mean, at the end of the day, Xavier Worthy, I really like him. I think he's got a great skill set. But I do think that his potential in the NFL can be potentially limited to a gadget role in the wrong system. So that's something to be wary of. And then also just there's a lot of mouths to feed. You've got Travis Kelce. Hollywood Brown is great for taking shots downfield. So I don't know. And they learned to win last year with Isaiah Pacheco and really running the ball. So I imagine that they're going to want to go back to that well. I don't expect Patrick Mahomes to be a 35 to 40 passing attempts a game type quarterback. Like, I just think they've discovered that with that defense and a good run game that they can really control the pace of play, and they don't need to put up 50 points anymore. So I would be very cautious of Xavier Worthy. I think he's going too high. I think, when you're if you're breaking down this group into tiers, right? You have, I think, the clear top two in terms of fantasy value are Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, who are alpha receivers on their team. And then Adunze is kind of a 1B, right? Where I love Adunze. I had him as probably my second ranked wide receiver in this group. But he's on a team with DJ Moore, who, having seen him in Carolina, he's a target hog. Like, he's such a good route runner. He can do so many different things so well. It's really hard to compete with him for target share. Cole Kmet's a good tight end. I wouldn't necessarily want to. They added Keenan Allen, right? Like, that's a lot of mouths to feed, and target share is not everything, but it's important. So, and then once you get into the two, I think there's a 2A in Brian Thomas Jr., right? And then I think there's 2B, right? And that's where you have your Xavier Legette, Worthy, Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, and Ricky Pearsall, right? So you have all these different guys. I just think when you look at a Keon Coleman, an Xavier Legette, those guys are alpha receivers. They're gonna get target share, and to me, that's more valuable than somebody like a Ricky Pearsall or an Xavier Worthy, who are just stuck so far down the depth chart on teams where it's going to be hard to win target share, right? If you're looking at Ricky Pearsall, sure, even in best case scenario with Ayuk leaving, he still has to compete with. He's pretty much exclusively a slot receiver, which in my opinion means that you're largely competing with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey for catches, and I just don't think that that's a spot you want to be in as a fantasy owner, at least when you compare it to the other receivers available, right? So, I think you got to be careful when you're looking at this 2B tier of receivers and how you position these guys. Target share is not everything, but it can be really important in terms of a receiver's development. And, obviously, like with Dynasty, you're not always just thinking about this year, right? You're thinking about down the road. But if you look at a room like San Francisco, it's going to be pretty stable for a few years, right? So movement within that room is tricky, right? Whereas if you look at a Lad McConkey, right? Like he's probably going to be, the starting slot receiver there, but like the other guys are not very good. He should have a chance to easily win target share in a pro style heavy run offense, right? Like, and then if you look at Xavier Legette, almost no competition for him. Adam Thielen's going to get his at slot receiver, but there's nobody on the outside to compete with Legette. You look at Keon Coleman. Yes, Curtis Samuel is in Buffalo, but Curtis Samuel is not an alpha type receiver, so he should be pretty easy to overcome. So, that's why I think, target share is not everything, right? That's why Brian Thomas Jr. is still our 2A. But it matters when you're trying to distinguish between receivers who are in the same tier. And that's why I think Xavier Worthy, because he's going ahead of Brian Thomas in almost every draft I've done. And it's like, no, he's a 2B and Thomas is a 2A. You should absolutely not be taking Worthy over Thomas. So that is my review of where I'm seeing the receiving class go in these fantasy drafts. I hope that was helpful. That's going to be it for today. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this show. If you want to get in contact with us, you can email us at hecklerspod@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show wherever you have found this podcast. That helps us to reach more people so that we can grow the podcast and hopefully to continue to produce really great content for you all. So please go ahead, do that, rate, subscribe, do all the things that we appreciate. That little bit of effort goes a long way. So with that, I hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening.